Houses in the Outer Banks collapsing into the sea. All along the coast, beaches are being swept away, threatening buildings and undoing long-standing efforts to protect the land. The problem's being felt strongest here in the Carolinas, where North and South Carolina have spent more than twice as many days in the cone of uncertainty than any other state. Today, it is a team effort with reporters talking to homeowners and experts, while I have First Alert Chief Meteorologist Bill Walsh joining me to help unpack everything that is going on. I'm Nick Reagan, and this is a Live 5 Deep Dive. All right, I got Chief Meteorologist Bill Walsh here with me now. He's going to help break down what we're seeing all along the coast in terms of the erosion, in terms of the storms, in terms of everything that is happening that is causing problems for everyone. Bill, thanks for sitting down with me. This is kind of an important topic that folks are looking at right now.
Topical right now.
Very topical. So let's play this first video here. This is out of North Carolina in the Outer Banks where homes are being reclaimed by the sea. So, Bill, I know that you have seen a lot of stuff in your years as a chief meteorologist, but I just got to ask, have you seen this kind of thing that often? I mean, how often are you seeing houses falling into the ocean?
You're seeing it more now, Nick, because the tides are rising a little bit higher. You've got, the king tide cycles. In this instance, we had a combination of king tides and we had a nor'easter, which drives that wind back in, coming in off the ocean. So it takes the tide that's already high and pushes it much higher. There's an old adage, water always wins. And if you look at beach erosion, if you look at that house right there, I mean, water is powerful. I mean, the pounds, per square inch of the force of waves like that are incredible. So we are seeing more of it. But again, when you get a combination of these things, it can be devastating, as we just saw right there. And of course, we've seen them with hurricanes. We've seen them with just very big king tides. And you can see and the beach erosion, and we'll get to, it has been really, really increased in the last couple of years, but in particular, this last event brought a lot of beach erosion.
Well, I want to talk about that a little bit because, we haven't seen yet a major storm hit our coast this year, right? But we are seeing a ton of damage. I feel like people think when we get damage, it's because we have a huge hurricane that comes in, slams into the coast, and messes everything up. But we haven't seen that this year, but we've still seen a ton of damage.
Right, we've seen a lot of damage, but it doesn't have to be a hurricane to do damage. It can be a nor'easter. It can be just king tides with an onshore flow. So damage can come in all kinds of different variations. Certainly a hurricane's going to bring wind, storm surge, flooding and whatnot. But a storm like what we had the last couple, over this last, week and a half, that classic nor'easter brought heavy tides, heavy rain, a secondary low formed along that axis of energy, and that spun back a bunch of rain on Sunday on top of the rain we already had. So, it doesn't take a hurricane, right, as you mentioned, to cause a lot of damage. And again, it comes from a combination of effects typically.
Yeah, I mean, we've already seen a bunch of big storms. They just haven't made it here yet, but certainly we're still seeing the effects, and then we throw in the king tides.
Yep.
Of course, that video that we just watched was out of North Carolina, but we're seeing the impacts here definitely along our shores. We've sent a number of our reporters out over the last week to capture some of that erosion. I believe on Isle of Palms, we sent out our Hannah Borkert. She talked to some of the homeowners, and I think we should listen to some of the stuff that she reported on here.
Sure.
The beginning of another nightmare.
When the tide is high, this is what it looks like from the front porch of Jimmy and Barbara Bernstein's house.
Tremendous erosion and devastation. And I'm in a confused and desperate state.
He's not alone. Many homeowners along Beechwood East and Wild Dunes watch as parts of their homes wash away. Owners Barbara and Jimmy Bernstein say they couldn't have imagined what it looks like now when they bought the property in 2011.
There was 100 yards of green trees, fescue, vegetation. I would have never even imagined this was even possible.
Now it sits boarded up, fighting powerful waves.
Water is going around the houses, which has happened right underneath my bed was an area that has just eroded away behind what we had repaired.
Right now, the state legislature prohibits them from putting in rocks like these to protect their homes. This home was grandfathered in years ago. Barbara says the sandbags just aren't working anymore.
There's a lot that we can do that we haven't been doing. And until we get into a proactive stance, we're going to keep experiencing this Band-Aid approach, which is probably not going to get us ahead of it.
Isle of Palms Council member Scott Pierce says the city previously approved an emergency deployment of sandbags at a cost of $550,000 with 1,200 bags, but they weren't installed quick enough.
They're wondering where those sandbags are.
Pierce says a new second opinion with a report on beach management confirms the city is behind in planning and execution of beach nourishment.
Unless we at least objectively evaluate what the engineers are telling us, that we may have to look at some technologies or some methods of retention. All we're going to be doing is putting millions of cubic yards of sand on this beach just to watch it end up going over to our neighbor island.
That's scary.
Yeah, no, it really is. To me, it looks like the kind of images that we get after a major storm. But again, haven't really felt that, certainly from, the wind and rain perspective.
Right. Well, that kind of oceanfront damage, like I said, doesn't have to come from a major storm. Mm-hmm. But remember, the ocean's there all the time. It rises, it goes down, it comes up, it gets higher. But there's the power of that water. And if your rising tides are higher, they're going to go further. And again, it's just a natural process.
Bill, over your years of being a meteorologist here in the Charleston area, kind of reflect back for me. We're seeing the images now. One person said, and this could be a bit of an exaggeration, but one person said that the beach, at least on IOP, hasn't looked this bad since like Hugo. I mean, walk me through sort of how you compare and contrast what we're seeing now.
Yeah, I mean, you're looking at the beach erosion right there, right? Mm-hmm. That is from the excessive tides, the king tides, and the northeast winds. And the difference with that, with Hugo, was a storm surge, right? 20-foot storm surge. And with Hugo, with the wind, the houses wouldn't be there. It was just lots, right? Nothing.
Right.
And but on the other hand, people built right up there against the beaches again. And what happens is it's just gonna eat away. The higher those tides get, the more inland that water's going to push, or the closer to those houses. So it's tough to defend against. I mean, they were talking about sandbags, right? I mean, the council folks and mayor, these $500,000 for sandbags. I mean, they're doing, they do the best they can, but sandbags can only do so much, right?
Right.
And it's, it has to do with how close you are to the water, and remembering just the power of that water is incredible.
Yeah. One of the things that another one of our reporters went out, Victoria Blair, she went out to not the Isle of Palms, over to Folly last week as well. And one of the things that she had reported on, and I hadn't seen anybody really talk about this much, is that the houses on the back side of the island, on the intercoastal waterway side of the island, are also seeing some effects of what I would assume is just high tides. And that's kind of crazy to me. Can you talk a little bit about what a king tide actually is, and how it is or isn't dependent on what the weather is doing?
Yeah, well, it has to do with the we call them perigean tides. Because the Earth is in an elliptical orbit with the sun, and the moon is in an elliptical orbit with the Earth. So as they get closer together or further apart, the closer together, then you're going to have different pulls of that tide. So you have gravity really that's taken over here. So what's going on with that, with the king tides, is that you can predict them, right? We have the next one's coming up probably around the 4th of November. They come about once a month or so. Again, it has to do with the gravitational pull of the Earth, the moon, and the sun. So the stronger the pull, the stronger your tides are going to be, right? And when you have a king tide like that, it can cause rises way above flood stage. Flood stage downtown 7 feet. We were 8.5, 8.6 feet, in that last event, right?
Yep.
So, when you have a king tide pushing on top of already a lot of water, it makes for a big problem. So king tides really are just a product of the Earth's gravitational pull of the moon, sun, and the Earth, and they occur about once every month or so.
Now, when we have a king tide, then you throw rain on top of that, or you throw a storm on top of that, it just makes for even higher tides.
Yeah, you're throwing gas on the fire, right?
Yeah.
You've got a nor'easter meaning northeasterly winds, pushing the tide. You've got a king tide, which is higher than usual, and you have rain on top of that. So all of that really adds up to that kind of beach erosion.
Yeah, it always surprises me when I'm downtown, like reporting in the water,
Right.
And we have these king tides. You can watch the water in the middle of downtown literally flow in and out just like waves on the beach. And to me, that's just crazy. But that's how low we are to sea level in Charleston.
That's why they call it the Low Country, right?
It
But
certainly
Charleston's
creates some
had a
problems.
history of that.
Yeah.
That story you did when you were going through the tunnels.
Yeah.
I mean, things are being mitigated, right? I mean, the drainage process. If you look at the crosstown now, it's really much improved over the last 15 years. So it's the mitigation is slow to happen because of the money it costs. But once it does happen, it's help. I mean, look at the Battery now. You've got that brand new seawall. It is absolutely beautiful, but it costs a lot of money. However, it's protecting a lot of homes there. It's also protecting the downtown area from the harbor. So
One of the things that was kind of a sort of egg on my face moment was earlier this year I believe in July. I did a story out on Folly Beach with the sand folks, the folks that measure the amount of sand that are out there. And at the time, I was told that Folly Beach has never looked better in terms of how much sand is on the island. It just looked great. And now, 3 months later, we're seeing a lot of sand washed away. So to some extent, I wonder if, the more sand you put out there through, the efforts of the Corps of Engineers and whoever else, I just wonder if sometimes it's just that much easier for it to get washed away.
Well, it's a temporary solution to a long-term problem.
Right.
And, you can't fight Mother Nature when it comes to ocean and when it comes to beach erosion, sand. I always liken it. I mean, I always say, like I said, water always wins. I mean, look at the Grand Canyon. Yep. I mean, it's millions and millions of years. And, and the same thing here, this coast. And if you look at where our coast was, 200 years, 100, 200, 300 years ago, then go way back, obviously there's erosion because of the water. So the water is very powerful.
Well, and one more thing that kind of strikes me is that these islands that are taking the biggest brunt of the erosion, these are barrier islands.
Yes.
These are effectively shifting sandbars just off the coast that move with the tides. And 20 years ago, they would have looked completely different. And 30 years before that, completely different.
Sure.
And so a lot of this, some of it is not necessarily, hit the panic button, but it is like acknowledging that this is how weather works on planet Earth.
Yes. And when you talk about the islands, again, they are barriers and they are protecting, like, Isle of Palm, Sullivan's Island, protecting Mount Pleasant. But during Hugo, I mean, that 20-foot storm surge came in. It was about 11, 12 feet on Sullivan's Island. And it went right over the island, right into, along that part of Mount Pleasant. And, it's tough to defend against that. And you mentioned the waterways, outside on the other side, not the ocean side, but the waterway side, like, for example, Hamlin Creek or over to Folly on the Folly River. That rises just like, because the king tide pushes the whole tide up higher. So it is higher there as well. So there's a lot of effects from that. But, everybody wants to live on the water, Nick. I know you've got your big house out there in the Isle of Palms.
Yeah.
And, no, it is, I mean, nothing is better than a beautiful ocean view, but you got to understand if you're too close to it, you can get burned.
Yeah, for sure. Well, give me your assessment of how you see things right now in terms of, how much trouble these barrier islands are, Folly, Sullivan's, IOP, and then also, if you can, sort of project outward for me, how much. What does the rest of the year look like? I know we've got, El Nina coming in
La
or
Nina.
something.
La Nina,
there it
yeah.
is. See, I don't know my Spanish very well.
That's
but
good.
But yeah, project out for me what folks need to know going forward in the next couple months.
You're talking about with king tides in first week around the 4th of November, when we set the clocks back 1 hour, by the way, don't forget that.
Great.
And then again in December. We have definitely going to be looking at La Nina kicking in. Typically for us, that is a milder winter, but a wetter winter. So we could see a wet, winter period. And as far as, the future of the islands and, how to mitigate, these tides and the ocean effect and beach erosion, I mean, we know how to do that, but it's the cost of doing that makes it much, very difficult to do. I always caution anybody, you're going to live on the island, it's an island, so there are certain hazards that come with that, and you have to, do your best to mitigate it. But it is kind of, you're playing with Mother Nature, right? So, we do have those hazards. Coastal hazards will continue. Will we have, another coastal storm this year? Not going to, well, certainly anytime we could see a coastal storm. Hurricane season ends at the end of November. We're still on the hook for a little while. So, to live on the islands is a bit of a risk, but it's, has great reward. But again, you just have to be able to be ready to mitigate that type of flooding. And, we've done a good job in trying to do that. But again, over time, you go back, 30, 40, 50 years, these shapes of the islands have changed because of weathering, really.
Yeah. I saw an interesting post from NOAA about how many days each state has spent in the cone of uncertainty during hurricane season so far.
Okay.
North and South Carolina have spent more time than any other state by twice as much. I can't remember. I think it was like 12 days in the cone of uncertainty. Then over on the other side of the country, it's Arizona and New Mexico, which I just think is that's interesting fact that they've had like 7 or 8 days or something, but maybe it's
shifting
4.
patterns,
but
sure, yeah. I mean, the cone of uncertainty is, it goes out wide, and that's because the error, the margin of error is much further as you go out into time. So, people look at that cone, but you get, it's not just a line.
Yep.
Hurricanes don't stop they don't stop right there on the coast. They go inland. I mean, we had Debbie last year, which wasn't a hurricane.
Right.
It was a tropical storm and dropped 20 plus inches of rain, particularly over parts of Berkeley County when it stalled once it passed here. Yep. So, I mean, there's a lot of different patterns that can set that up. But, it is, we're into and we've had more Category 5 hurricanes in the last 5 or 10 years than we've had in decades, right? Yeah. I mean, you look at Umberto, that was a nasty storm that pulled, thankfully, Imelda out the coast. So, I mean, we're going to have weather, we're going to have storms, and they go up and down in cycles a lot of times. So, we just have to be ready. I always say, we know there's going to be weather. You just have to plan to be ready for the weather.
All right. Well, Bill, I think we'll leave it there. Plan to be ready for the weather, and we know that, of course, you will be keeping us ready.
We'll give you that first alert. Oh, by the way, there is an IPA called the Cone of Uncertainty.
Oh yes, I think I've actually seen this.
Yes,
yeah.
And I saw it and I took a picture of it. I was like, that's brilliant.
I think we need a case for the station.
Yeah. That's always, you start seeing us bring that in. It's probably not a good thing.
All right. Thanks,
All right.
Bill.
Thanks, Nick.